Everyone in the circle knows that I've been infatuated with Felix since I was a child. He went to school. And I went to school. He learned 8 languages. And I learned 8 languages. He studied finance. And I studied finance. Anyway, the Gu and Shen families will definitely have an arranged marriage. The business empire is intricately intertwined, and neither family can do without the other. Unexpectedly, on the day of the wedding, Felix took a detour on his way to pick up the bride and went abroad to save his distressed first love. Our relationship as childhood sweethearts has become the biggest joke, wearing a wedding dress worth 8 figures. I completed this grand wedding alone. On that day, there were overwhelming news articles. And for the first time, my name was ranked ahead of his. What a fool. There are 2-legged men running all over the street. There is one and only one formed business empire. I'm not only infatuated with his body, but I'm also coveting his money. Felix's plane had already taken off, and I locked myself in the lounge and shed a tear. My hot-tempered father was swearing outside the lounge, and Felix's father angrily dialed one phone call after another, striving to arrest Felix as soon as he landed. There were 2 messages on my phone. Felix, Serena. Wait for me to come back, and I will give you an explanation. The other message was a photo of Felix. He was walking towards the boarding gate, talking on the phone with his head down. The suit he was wearing was the wedding dress for picking up the bride, and I had gone over countless details with the designer. The tie I carefully selected was hanging loosely around his neck. His eyebrows and eyes were gentle, and his eyes were full of doting. It seemed that he was softly coaxing the person on the other end of the phone. Anyone who saw would sigh that the girl being coaxed by him was really lucky. I enlarged the photo and looked at it carefully for a while. I really hate to part with it. However, I gave him a chance. And he made his choice. One should be committed to one's decisions without regret. After touching up my makeup, I dragged the long train of my wedding dress, opened the door of the lounge, and smiled as I greeted the elders with various expressions outside the door. The wedding will proceed as usual. Felix returned to the country 3 days later. In those 72 hours, I was the well-deserved traffic password. All the major newspapers, tabloids, and self-media in the country were discussing the eldest daughter of the Serena family. Serena, who was abandoned by Felix on the day of the wedding but still insisted on going through all the complicated wedding procedures alone. Some people lamented the coldness of the wealthy family. Some people expressed their indignation for me. And naturally, there were also those who gloated. Anyway, having fulfilled my exhaustion with the overwhelming press releases, my name was ranked ahead of Felix's for the first time. To express his apology to the Serena family, my father-in-law, Felix's father, personally hosted a banquet to make amends to the Serena family. As the glasses were raised and clinked, when the atmosphere was right, Felix's father raised his glass to me. Serena, this glass of wine is for you. Dad, you are indeed the daughter of Serena's father. Dad thanks you. You made a prompt decision and took the overall situation into consideration, preserving the dignity of our 2 families. It's the Felix family that's sorry for you. Don't worry. Dad will definitely give you an explanation for this matter. I raised my glass with a submissive look and was just about to speak when the door of the banquet hall was pushed open. And Felix walked in, looking travel-worn. When my father saw him, his face darkened, and he put down the glass he had raised and my drink heavily. The huge banquet hall fell silent. Felix's father glanced at my father, gritted his teeth, and scolded Felix. Kneel down. Felix walked step by step in front of my father and bent slightly. Dad, I was wrong about this matter. My father gave a cold snort and didn't respond to him. Felix straightened up and placed a document on the table. I will atone for my sins. This time I went to the United States, representing the Serena family as the son-in-law of the Serena family. I signed a cooperation agreement with the BL Group. The Serena family had been striving for the cooperation with BL for half a year. All the details had been finalized, but BL had been reluctant to sign the contract. The Serena family made inquiries from many sources but couldn't find a breakthrough. My father was so worried about this cooperation project that his hair turned white. I have to say that Felix knows what it means to attack the mind. Taking out this contract is a great merit for the Serena family. My father choked on his breath. He didn't know whether to show a dark face or a smiling face towards Felix. Felix stood in front of my father with his hands hanging down and his eyebrows furrowed. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, and his face was calm and composed. Felix's father heaved a sigh of relief. And he took the lead in clapping. Father of Serena. What do you think? My son is not bad. Right? He helped you secure the cooperation with BL in one fell swoop. He deserves to be rewarded for his merits. Led by President Felix. The people at the table, after the initial awkwardness, also joined in the applause. The atmosphere gradually became lively. However, Felix, you have caused so much embarrassment to the Serena family. Why do you think you can turn the page so easily? I frowned and, with red eyes, walked up to Felix and looked him up and down. Felix, why are you still wearing the wedding dress from the day you picked up the bride? Are you so tired from taking care of Lily that you didn't even have time to change your clothes? The banquet hall suddenly fell silent, and Felix's smile froze on his face. I forced a smile and stepped forward to push him out. You go back and take a shower. Change your clothes. And have a rest. Don't worry. I'm here. There was a loud sound of someone slapping the table behind me. Without looking back, I knew it was my father. Felix's father's voice sounded. Stop. Don't go anywhere. In the standoff, a delicate figure rushed in from outside the door and squeezed between me and Felix. Don't make things difficult for brother Felix. It's my fault. It's all my fault. The person who came was the culprit who made Felix abandon me. His first love. Lily. It was late autumn. And Lily was wearing a thin pure white cotton dress. And her thin body was shivering. In full view of everyone, Felix took off his coat without saying a word and held her in his arms. Didn't I tell you to wait for me in the car? Why did you come up? Are you cold? Lily's face was pale. And with red eyes, she leaned against Felix's arms. Brother Felix. Don't quarrel with Father Felix because of me. It's not worth it. I don't have much time left. I can't leave you with a mess. Before she could say a few words, Lily coughed violently. Felix's eyebrows furrowed into a Chuan character. Without saying a word, he picked Lily up horizontally. Lily, don't be afraid. I'll take you to the hospital. Without looking at anyone at the scene, Felix lowered his head, softly soothing Lily as he walked out. Felix. Stop. Felix's father was furious. And he shouted angrily. If you dare to walk out of this door, everything in the Felix family will have nothing to do with you. Felix stopped in his tracks, turned around, and looked coldly at Felix's father. The thing I regret the most is allowing you to send Lily abroad back then. Do you think you can still manipulate me like you did back then? Felix's father's face turned livid. But he couldn't say a word. My father shook his head. Father of Felix. It seems that you can no longer be the master of the Felix family. Felix looked at my father and raised the corners of his mouth. Dad. The first thing I did when I returned to the country was not to arrange for Lily to be hospitalized but to bring you the contract with BL. This is my greatest sincerity for the future cooperation between the Gu and Shen families. Some things that shouldn't be said should just rot in my stomach. He turned to me. His eyes cold. Serena. I promised to marry you. And I did it. I'm giving you the identity of Mrs. Felix. I guarantee that you can live a life without financial worries. As for feelings, I advise you not to expect too much. After saying that, he held Lily in his arms and walked out without looking back. Lily shrank in his arms, turned her head, stared straight at me, and with a very slight movement, raised the corners of her mouth. In full view of everyone, I shed tears. Felix and I grew up as childhood sweethearts, being affectionate and close. I was his little follower since I was a child. I followed him to learn foreign languages, business, equestrians, and wine tasting. I didn't have my own hobbies. Felix's hobbies were Serena's hobbies. The businesses of the Gu and Shen families had been intertwined with each other since our father's generation and were inseparable. So, it was almost a tacit understanding among all the elders that Felix and I would get married. The only accident was probably in the second year of senior high school. Lily received a school sponsorship quota and transferred to our class as a poor student. She was like a little white flower growing in the ruins. Delicate and tenacious. And easily aroused Felix's pity for her. The young man's feelings had just sprouted but were nipped in the bud by Felix's father. Even though Felix protested strongly, Lily was still sent abroad by Felix's father. Felix completely lost contact with Lily. Since then, he began to become silent. He grew up rapidly in silence and gradually took on the responsibility of the Felix family. When he proposed to me, I asked him what he would choose if Lily came back. At that time, his eyes were shining with starlight. And his gaze towards me was affectionate and focused. Serena. She's just an insignificant episode. The wife of Felix will only be you. And it can only be you. The kiss he left on my eyes that day still seemed to have some lingering warmth. But in an instant, everything had changed. From childhood to adulthood, the number of times I've shed tears in front of others can be counted on one hand. Watching me cry in public must be more painful for my father than killing him. My father lost his temper with Felix's father regardless of the situation. He and my mother held my hands on both sides and took me back to my parents' home. I didn't forget to take the contract with BL. Felix didn't look for me. The news about him and Lily was still passed on to me by my gossipy best friend. Lily had cancer and didn't have much time left, but she refused to be hospitalized. She almost obsessively demanded to live in the bridal chamber that Felix and I shared. Such an outrageous request, yet Felix didn't refuse it. Rain was so angry that she was gesturing wildly in front of me. Serena. Do you have any reaction at all? Aren't you angry about this? Was I angry? I stopped my work. Put my hand on my heart. Closed my eyes. And felt for a while. I was a bit sad. But not much. Seeing that Rain was so angry that she was almost fuming, I smiled and tapped her forehead. The contract with BL has reached the first payment now. And I have to keep a close eye on it. Money is 100 times more important than a man. My dear friend. Rain spat at me, in disgust. Come on. Serena. You're not short of money at all. Your Serena family and the Felix family can make the whole circle shake when you stomp your feet. Seeing that she was so angry that she might faint at any moment, I thought about it and gave her some reassurance. Don't worry. This matter isn't over yet. Lily will probably come to me soon. As I had expected. Seeing that I didn't react to her provocation at all, Lily couldn't hold her temper and came to me. Sitting in the CAF downstairs of the Serena family building, I sized her up carefully and smiled, saying, Lily, you look in good spirits. It seems that Felix is taking good care of you. Lily stretched her hand in front of me. Mrs. Felix. Does this look familiar? This is the bracelet passed down in the Felix family. If I remember correctly, Felix gave it to you on the day he proposed to you. Seeing you wrapping it up layer by layer and keeping it in the cabinet, it's really laughable. The thing you cherish so much. I just took a couple of extra looks at it. And Felix gave it to me. You're just relying on your family background to occupy the identity of Mrs. Felix. Other than that, you have nothing. And I, apart from the identity of Mrs. Felix, having fulfilled my FSI, have everything that you don't have. Looking at Lily's arrogant appearance, I somehow found it rather amusing. Lily, congratulations on having your dream come true. There's a detail that you might not have noticed, but I'd like to remind you of it. Felix's father sent you abroad. And for all those years, you tried every means possible, but couldn't get in touch with Felix. Guess who was at that? Just on the eve of my wedding with Felix. Revealed the news of our marriage to you? And why is it that you couldn't get through to Felix's phone number for 10 whole years? But suddenly you could? Lily was stunned. She widened her eyes and looked at me in disbelief. Surely it wasn't you. Was it? Are you crazy? I leaned back against the chair, looking at her with a smile and not saying a word. Lily stared at me for a long time. And her eyes began to flicker. She was flustered. Serena. What on earth is your purpose? I felt as if I had heard the most ridiculous joke. Lily. You call me Mrs. Felix. Do you still need to ask this question? Of course. I want to defend my family and keep my husband. I spent more than 20 years trying to marry into the Felix family. How could I just give him away to you? Lily was so angry that she picked up the coffee cup on the table and was about to throw it at me. I took out a document and handed it to her. When she saw the words on the document, Lily's face, which had been fair with a tinge of red, instantly turned deathly pale. You, how do you have this thing? I smiled, picked up my bed, and stood up. Lily, I won't let go. Let's see who has the better ability. A few days later, I was invited to the 20th birthday party of Jocelyn, the daughter of the Jocelyn family. As soon as I entered the door, I happened to see Jocelyn raise her hand and slap Lily across the face with a resounding slap. With a crisp slap, half of Lily's fair and tender face visibly swelled up. Jocelyn was obviously furious. She grabbed Lily's hair and gave it a hard tug, and Lily fell clumsily to the floor. The little princess was about to step forward again when Felix's cold voice rang out, "Jocelyn, that's enough." Jocelyn stopped in her tracks, turned around to look at Felix, and there were tears in her eyes. She reached out and tugged at her beautiful little cocktail dress, which had been splashed with red wine. And the wine was still dripping down. "Felix, I invited you to my birthday party, and you let me suffer such an injustice?" Obviously, it was Lily's doing. Jocelyn is the youngest daughter of Jocelyn's father, and she has 3 older brothers, born to her parents when they were old. She has been doted on since childhood. Jocelyn started acting at the age of 16, and by the age of 20, she had swept up all the major awards in the entertainment industry. With great fame and honor, she is the youngest and most sought-after actress. When has she ever suffered such an injustice? Before Felix could speak, Lily got up from the ground and pushed Jocelyn aside. "You little vixen! Stay away from Brother Felix. Dressed like this and coming to ask Brother Felix for a drink. Who doesn't know what kind of intentions you have?" Lily turned to Felix, with half of her face red and swollen, and tears streaming down like beads off a broken string. She looked as if she was about to fall apart. "Brother Felix, I understand. I've caused you trouble. I don't have a prominent family background, and I don't have the time to build my own career like Jocelyn either. I deserve everything I've suffered. I understand. Felix felt so sorry for her that he hugged her in his arms. "Silly girl. I'm your biggest support." Lily raised her head from his arms. "Really? I also want to act like Jocelyn, win the Best Actress award, and be loved by thousands of fans. Will you support me?" Felix immediately made a phone call and gave instructions to start a film and television company to support Lily. I watched the farce in front of me from a distance and just found it ridiculous. People will eventually be trapped by the things they couldn't obtain in their youth for their whole lives. That high and mighty Felix was, without any surprise, about to be pulled down from his pedestal by Lily. Felix gradually became the laughingstock in the circle of friends. Of course, Mrs. Felix, was in the same situation. Lily firmly occupied his life. She was present at every meeting he attended and every event he participated in. After Lily had gone crazy a few times, all the people of the opposite sex in the circle sensibly kept a distance from Felix. The next time I saw Felix was when the Gu and Shen families jointly signed a major project at the municipal government, and we had to attend a press conference led by the municipal government. The elders had gradually stepped back into the background, and as the leaders of the group, Felix and I had the responsibility to attend such events. While waiting for our turn, I was a bit surprised to see that there was no one beside Felix. "Is Lily not accompanying President Felix today?" Felix looked at me, and a hint of obscurity flashed through his eyes. "She's filming on the set." A few months after he had said that I shouldn't expect his affection, Felix actually smiled at me. "Today's event is very important, and it's only appropriate for Mrs. Felix to accompany me." I took 2 steps back to keep an appropriate distance from him. "President Felix. In such an occasion, it's more appropriate for you to call me President Serena." The smile froze on Felix's face. He took a step forward and said with some difficulty, "Serena." At this moment, the host just invited the guests to enter the venue. I ignored the emotion in Felix's eyes that I couldn't understand, nodded at him, and turned to enter the venue. The press conference was broadcast live. After taking my seat, I suddenly thought of a question and turned to confirm it with Felix, who was sitting on my right. President Felix. Does Lily know that we will attend this event together? The host was speaking very loudly. In order to hear my words clearly, Felix slightly tilted his head in my direction. As soon as I finished speaking, Felix's phone, which was placed on the table, started vibrating. The host announced the official start of the press conference, and the leader of the municipal government gave a speech. Felix hesitated for a second, then reached out and hung up the phone. The leader of the municipal government gave a speech for 5 minutes, and Felix's phone vibrated frantically for 5 minutes. I looked at the 3 words Lily jumping on the screen, turned to Felix, and smiled. The relationship between President Felix and Lily is really enviable. Felix pursed his lips and didn't say anything. After the speech, it was the part where the winning enterprises expressed their stances, and the live broadcast camera was focused on me. I stood up, having sat for too long. My blood wasn't circulating well, and my legs were numb. I tilted in Felix's direction. Felix instinctively stood up and supported me. My hand was still in Felix's palm. I looked up at him and smiled with my eyebrows curved. Thank you, Felix. Felix was stunned. He stared blankly at me until I smiled and pulled my hand out. Before I could finish reciting my speech of stance, suddenly a staff member rushed in and whispered something in the host's ear. The host quickly reported to the leader of the municipal government. After getting the leader's approval, the screen on the spot was turned on and the signal was connected. Lily's figure standing on the rooftop appeared on the screen. Brother Felix, why didn't you answer my call? Serena is smiling at you so happily. Are you attracted to her? Why? Why do you have to force me to use this way for you to see me? The camera was focused on Felix. He stood up and stared fixedly at the big screen. Lily, I'm at work. Don't be impulsive. Come down first. Lily was going crazy. She shouted heart-wrenchingly, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. You've already reached this position. If you don't want to do something, who else can force you to do it? You just want to see Serena, don't you? After you two got married. You've been staying with me all this time. You miss her. You want to see her, don't you? You even reached out to support her. You even touched her hand. Felix rubbed his temples warily and softened his voice. Lily, indeed, I didn't. Come down first. I'll go back to find you now. Okay? Lily's voice cracked with excitement. No. No, unless you prove it to me. Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. Go and slap Serena. Go, if you slap her, I'll believe that the person you love is me. Felix looked at the leader of the municipal government sitting next to him. The leader's face had turned dark, and he didn't even spare him a glance. Felix finally sank his face. Lily, stop being so unreasonable. Probably Felix had never spoken harshly to Lily before. As soon as these words were spoken, Lily went crazy. She rushed down from the rooftop, got into her car, and charged towards the crowd. There were a lot of extras watching on the spot. They didn't have time to dodge, and we could only watch helplessly as some people were knocked down to the ground on the screen. Lily didn't stop the car and drove away. When we arrived at the scene, both the police and the ambulance had already arrived, and the scene was in chaos. There were injured people lying all over the ground, and blood was everywhere. I made a prompt decision and arranged for the staff to open all the doors of the heiress and help the slightly injured people into the heiress to rest. While I was busy, I heard Felix's phone ring, and Lily's crying voice reached my ears. Brother Felix. Woo-woo. I was wrong. I was wrong. The car crashed into a tree, and I'm stuck. I'm so scared. I'm bleeding a lot. And I want to see you. I turned around and saw that Felix was busy arranging for the injured, so he turned on the speakerphone. Hearing Lily's words, he immediately stood up and asked nervously, Lily, where are you? I'll come to find you right away. He was talking and walking outside. I sighed and called out to him from behind. Felix, having so felt why I'm sorry. With such a big thing happening, you can't leave. The film and television company is a subsidiary of the Felix family. If the subsequent resettlement work is not carried out properly, it will seriously affect the image of the Felix family. You must stay and deal with the aftermath. Perhaps hearing my voice, Lily cried even more miserably. Brother Felix. Will I never see you again? Woohoo. I love you. I love you. If I die like this, don't forget me. Felix hesitated. His eyes were full of pain and struggle. After a moment, he gritted his teeth and bent his straight spine towards me. Serena. I'm counting on you here. Lily. She is in the late stage of cancer and doesn't have much time left. I will definitely pay you back for what I owe you in the future. Before I could respond, Felix turned around and was about to leave. Felix. Do you know what my nickname, Serena, means? He paused in his steps. Maybe he heard it. Or maybe he didn't. But he didn't look back and strode away. I sighed and said to myself, during the Serena's Olo term, the crops begin to ripen. The harvest season is about to arrive. This was a group incident, and the impact was extremely bad. Felix's act of deserting the battlefield was photographed by passers-by and posted online, adding insult to injury to the Felix family, which was already at the center of public opinion. I worked continuously for 48 hours without sleep, taking charge of the overall situation in the capacity of Mrs. Felix, appeasing the injured, and putting forward a practical compensation plan. Finally, having fulfilled me, I minimized the negative impact. When I had dealt with all the matters and dragged my tired body out of the Felix family building, I was greatly startled by the figure standing at the door. It was Felix. His eyes were bloodshot. He had a stubble on his face, and there were cigarette butts scattered all over the ground at his feet. He looked haggard all over. Serena. When he opened his mouth, his hoarse voice made it almost impossible for me to hear what he said. Serena. Lily has been arrested. My dad was so angry that he had a heart attack and is now being rescued in the ICU. I looked up at the sky. The sky in the east was already showing a fish belly white, and a ray of morning glow was about to pierce through the darkness. As if I didn't see Felix's decadence, I smiled and said to him a sentence that seemed to have no beginning or end. Felix. Look. It's going to be dawn. Felix's father finally regained consciousness, and Felix and I rushed to the hospital together. When Felix's father woke up, half of his hair had turned white. Seeing Felix, he closed his eyes in disappointment and turned his head to the side. Felix's mother's eyes were swollen from crying. She stood up, took my hand, and tears began to fall again. Before Felix could speak, his phone rang. He hesitated for a moment and turned on the speakerphone. Hello. Is this Mr. Felix? Ms. Lily is detained in our detention center, and she is making a fuss to see you. After we refused her request according to the regulations, she bit her own tongue and tried to commit suicide. We discovered it in time, and Lily only suffered minor skin injuries. Before the other person could finish speaking, Felix had already turned around and ran towards the door. Felix. Come back. Felix's mother burst into tears with a wow. Felix hesitated for a moment, but still opened the door and left without looking back. Felix's father closed his eyes in pain, and a tear rolled down from the corner of his eye. I stood there, and the atmosphere was extremely awkward for a while. Just as I was hesitating whether to leave or not, Felix's father's special assistant ran in panting. Chairman. Something's wrong. I instinctively grabbed him. Assistant Shen. What's the matter? Take your time and speak. Assistant Shen hadn't even caught his breath yet. Looking at the chairman lying on the hospital bed with a deathly pale face, he fell silent. Felix's father waved his hand. It's okay. Go ahead and say it. Only then did Assistant Shen say cautiously, just received a notice from the municipal government. They are very dissatisfied with President Felix's performance in this incident. They require that the Felix family withdraw from this project, or consider it again after replacing the general manager. Felix's mother stood up abruptly, looking flustered. Felix's father lay on the hospital bed, gasping for breath. The blood pressure monitor beside the bed was beeping frantically. I quickly pressed the service bell beside the bed. Before the nurse arrived, Felix's father couldn't catch his breath and fainted. Felix's father had a stroke. Thanks to the timely rescue, his life was saved. Half of his body was paralyzed, and he could only spend the rest of his life lying in bed. Felix received the news and rushed back from the detention center. What awaited him was the group's decision to replace the general manager. The person taking over was me. He stood outside Felix's father's hospital room for several days. But Felix's father refused to see him. One late night, after dealing with official business, I was so exhausted that I decided to make do with sleeping in the office for the night. Just as I turned off the lights, my phone started vibrating. It was Felix. After hesitating for a moment, I answered the phone. Felix. It was quiet on the other end of the receiver. And I called again. Felix? Felix should have been drinking. His voice spread out like fog in the late night. Serena. I brought the bracelet back and put it back in its original place. It's been many days. Why haven't you come back to get it? Afraid of stimulating him, I carefully considered my tone and replied to him. Felix. You know that I've never used things that others had used since I was a child. He was silent. After a long while, I heard him laugh self-deprecatingly. Also including people, right? I didn't know how to answer, so I softly hummed as a response. It was late at night. Probably because I didn't hang up the phone. It gave him an outlet to express his desire to pour out his feelings. Felix laughed and cried on the phone. Serena. Lily lied to me. She lied to me. She doesn't have cancer at all. She just used the pretext of having cancer to gain my sympathy. No wonder. No wonder she refused to go to the hospital no matter what and insisted on staying at home. I only found out when she had a medical examination in the detention center that she wasn't sick at all. Not at all. When he got excited, Felix began to cry, whimpering. Serena. I regret it so much. For such a person. I hated my dad for more than 10 years. For her. I missed our wedding and broke your heart. Serena. After going around in circles, I finally realized that in this world, only you, Wulan, only you, are truly good to me with all your heart. As Felix spoke, I listened quietly. The gentle evening breeze blew in through the window. In a trance, I remembered that year, when Lily was sent abroad by Felix's father. Felix took his anger out on me and gave me the cold shoulder for a long time. But I was worried about him. I would go to find him in the late night every time he drank too much with his friends and pick him up and take him home with the driver. That night, the evening breeze was gentle. Just like tonight. I stood at the door of the private room and heard his friend ask him, Felix. Serena goes around the world looking for you every day. She looks pitiful. If it really doesn't work, make it clear to her and set her free. The evening breeze was so gentle. What did Felix say? He said, if it weren't for the arranged marriage with Serena, Lily wouldn't have been treated so unfairly. Lily is suffering alone abroad. Why should Serena be happy? Not only will I marry her, but I will also take over the Serena family and make her the laughingstock of the whole world. I came back to my senses from the memory. Felix was silent. He should have fallen asleep, and his deep and shallow breathing sounds came from the receiver. I smiled softly. Felix. Serena won't always be waiting for you. Serena has already walked a long way forward. On a pleasant afternoon, Jocelyn and I went to the detention center to visit Lily together. The double torture of her body and mind made her extremely haggard. She was more like a little white flower about to be blown away by the wind. Through the thick bulletproof glass, Lily stared at me fiercely, her eyes as venomous as if poisoned. Serena. Are you here to show off your victory? I smiled softly. Lily. Do you still think that I see you as a rival even today? You are just a pawn. I turned on my phone and showed her the photo of Felix in his wedding dress at the boarding gate. My people were able to take a photo of Felix boarding the plane. As long as I want, I can stop him. That day, it was also the last chance I gave him. Lily seemed to be struck by something and finally realized. You deliberately leaked the news of your marriage to me? You deliberately lured me back and made me the culprit who destroyed all of this. She stood up excitedly and slapped the glass hard. Crazy. You're crazy. Don't you love Felix? What on earth do you want to do? She was so emotional that when she saw Jocelyn standing behind me, she even scolded Jocelyn. And you? And you? If it weren't for you to provoke me, why would I have wanted to enter the entertainment industry? Without the matter in the entertainment industry, there wouldn't have been so many people gathered there. I wouldn't have committed a crime. I wouldn't have been locked up. I wouldn't have been discovered by Felix that I was faking my illness. My good life has all been ruined by you too. Ruined. I was a bit helpless. Why do you still think that my goal is Felix even today? My goal is clearly the Felix family. Lily was pressed onto the chair by the prison guard. And she was still cursing. What does that have to do with me? The games of you rich people. What does that have to do with me? Why did you drag me into it? I stood up and stared intently into her eyes. When you occupied my bridal chamber like a turtledove occupying a magpie's nest and took my bracelet without asking, why didn't you ask that it was all a game of the rich? Why were you joining in the fun? Lily broke free from the prison guard and pounced on the glass. Serena. You wait. I will definitely tell Felix. I will definitely. I took 2 steps back, smiled, waved at her, hung up the phone, and turned to leave. On the way back, Jocelyn asked me how I was so sure that Felix and Lily would fall into the traps I set for them one after another. I thought for a moment and told her. In this life, no one can escape their own desires. Felix has had a smooth life. And Lily is the only setback he has ever faced. He will definitely be trapped by it. And Lily. She spent more than a decade abroad and never gave up. She tried every means to get in touch with Felix. As long as I give her hope, she will be unable to help herself and hold on to Felix like a life-saving straw until she drags both of them into the abyss. Both of us fell silent. We both knew that we ourselves were also caught up in this situation. With the support of the elders in the family, I took over the Felix family and managed to make a smooth transition. The affairs of the two groups were extremely complicated. After multiple rounds of demonstration, a feasible plan was formulated. With the consent of the shareholders, the Felix family group and the Serena family group were officially merged. The once independent business giants finally became an unshakable behemoth in my hands. The group was thriving under my leadership. Felix, on the other hand, lost all his fighting spirit. He stayed in the bridal chamber that he and I once shared every day, studying the dishes I liked and asking me if I would be home for dinner. I never went back to that so-called home again. Time passed uneventfully until Lily was released from prison after serving her sentence. And then, the final blow came. Felix rushed into my office with Lily. His eyes were red, and he looked as if he was about to fall apart. He stood in front of me, his hands trembling, and tried to reach out and pull me. Serena, tell me that what Lily said isn't true. Lily stood behind Felix, holding her head up triumphantly, under Felix's expectant gaze. I nodded. What she said should be true, if she didn't exaggerate it. Felix took 2 steps back. Lily tried to support him, but he shook off her hand forcefully. Serena, was it all fake? The years we accompanied each other, the days when you followed me, learned foreign languages and finance, and pestered me to give you lectures, were they all fake? When you agreed to marry me, you looked so happy. Was everything a lie? I thought you were the only one who treated me sincerely. Why? Why are you treating me like this too? I didn't answer his series of whys. Instead, I took out a document from the filing cabinet behind me and placed it in front of him. Felix, I think this document can tell you the answer. Felix picked up the document with trembling hands. After seeing the content of the document, cold sweat slid down his temples. I motioned for Lily to help him sit on the sofa, made him a cup of coffee, and placed it beside him. Felix, let's be honest. The Serena family, with all the strength of the group, couldn't secure the cooperation deal with BL and couldn't find any breakthrough. The president of BL is your friend from your time studying in the United States. And you, at the cost of another deal between the Felix family and him, asked him to put the cooperation with the Serena family on hold indefinitely. Your purpose was to bring down the Serena family. Am I right? I looked at Lily, who was standing beside us looking confused, and smiled. Come to think of it, I should thank Lily. When you learned that Lily was seriously ill, you couldn't wait to go abroad to bring her back, and even missed our wedding. For this, you had to show the contract with BL to appease my father's anger. I know that Lily is the one you can't get over. But it was Felix's father who separated you two. I, as a teenager, didn't do anything wrong. But you took out all your anger, which you were powerless to resist against Felix's father, on me, and the Serena family. I once treated you with all my heart. But every step was a calculation. If you didn't love me, why did you marry me? Because you needed the support of the Serena family. Now, I can be said to have fulfilled your dream. The Gu and Shen families have been merged into one in my hands. We are still husband and wife. Which is more or less equivalent to you achieving your dream. Right? Felix? Felix looked at me with red eyes. You clearly don't love me, and you knew I was calculating you. Why did you marry me? I looked at him in surprise. As if looking at a stranger I didn't know. Felix? Is this something you should ask? The identity of Mrs. Felix was the greatest help for me to complete the whole plan. Felix remained silent for a very long time. So long that I almost lost my patience. Finally, he stood up, without saying a word, and walked towards the door step by step. With his hand on the doorknob, he turned back and said word by word, Serena, I will take back everything that belongs to me. In the following days, Felix made a lot of efforts both openly and secretly. But all of them failed. The two groups had already been integrated. And he had been decadent for 2 years. Apart from a small amount of dry shares that could earn dividends, he had almost no support. Being turned away time and time again completely wore down Felix's spirit. He finally became the playboy who only knew how to spend money. The kind of person he once hated the most. On my 25th birthday, Rain and Jocelyn took the lead and invited the second-generation people in the circle to have a great time. I nestled on the sofa, letting them laugh and play. Rain couldn't stand it anymore. She brought 10 male models over and made them stand in front of me, forcing me to choose one. She smiled and leaned in front of me. 2 are okay. 3 are also okay. I squinted my eyes and casually scanned the group, then pointed at one of them. Him. The male model squatted in front of me, lowered his head, and timidly called me President Serena. The young man had a delicate appearance and 8-pack abs. His hands, which were massaging my thighs, applied just the right amount of pressure. I closed my eyes comfortably. Time seemed to stand still. Until Felix's angry voice came. Serena, don't forget that you are still Mrs. Felix. The young man seemed to be frightened. And his hands froze. I patted his hand, signaling him to continue. Opening my eyes and facing Felix's fierce gaze, I couldn't help but laugh. Felix, I promised to marry you. And I did it. I gave you the identity of Serena's husband. I guarantee that you can live a life without worrying about food and clothing. As for feelings, Felix, I advise you not to expect too much. Laughter rang out around us. I squinted my eyes and seemed to see the little girl who had eagerly followed Felix more than a decade ago finally stop and smile at me.